Mr. Carroll, why did your client suddenly decide to crusade for prison reform?
I don't think it's a sudden change at all. John has always, since he's been in prison, fought against things that he thought were wrong as far as the prison system goes.
Does he still want to die rather than spend the rest of his life behind bars?
As I indicated to the Supreme Court today in my argument, I think his ultimate wish to die has not been altered. He is authorizing us to appeal his case, so obviously he risks the possibility that he may never accomplish that particular end. But as far as backing off from his original desire, I don't think he has.
Is he protesting the method?
We are not protesting the method for him in the courts of the state. He is protesting the method and seeking legislative change on his own.
Do you feel Alabama's death penalty will survive a struggle in the U.S. Supreme Court?
As we've argued to the Court of Criminal Appeals here in the Supreme Court here, we think that the Alabama statute's unconstitutional and are mildly confident that we will be able to prevail in the Supreme Court on that argument.
Do you feel the stay granted today is any indication of the unconstitutionality of the death penalty?
Not at all. I think that the United States Supreme Court has said that the state Supreme Courts are the primary protectors of constitutional rights, and I think that today the Alabama Supreme Court showed exactly why that exists. I think that they did everything they could to ensure that John Evans exhausted whatever legal remedies he had available to him, and I think, that was a fine ruling on their part.
To borrow $15 million with all of this money on hand would be like a person having a savings account of $200,000 going down to the bank and borrowing $4,000 to trade cars. It does not make sense. I will oppose the bond issue. I will also offer a bill or an amendment to appropriate that amount directly to the Board of Corrections for capital outlay purposes. I also will offer a similar amendment or bill that will transfer from this surplus approximately $20 million to the Highway Department for the purpose of beginning the first year of a 3-year emergency highway maintenance program, estimated to cost during that 3 years somewhere between $80 and $100 million. Here again, this is necessary because we just will not face the reality of highway maintenance in this state. While satisfying those who have broad and specific interest in educational monies, we are standing around ignoring the fact that we have a $6 billion investment in highways deteriorating right in front of our eyes. Now, after saying that I'm going to offer these appropriation amounts, let me remind you that this would still leave approximately $140 million of new money, of increases that could be appropriated to the educational programs in this state. Now, I want to ask Paul Hubbard publicly. He's going to say that's not enough. If a $140 million increase in educational expenditures is not enough, is $175 enough? Is $200 million enough? Is any amount enough? The truth is, the posture of the AEA and Paul Hubbard is that they want everything and they don't care about the other state programs.
The gentleman that said that about the district attorneys is a northeastern establishment liberal, educated up in the Northeast. He's decided to come back to Alabama, and he thinks he's going to tell us how to campaign. He comes from a wealthy family. I happen to have a family I have to support, and I'm not going to resign as district attorney. You can't resign because it leaves your office open. And for him to say that he's done something that's a great moral thing by resigning as an assistant attorney general is terribly misleading, because he's required to resign as a merit system employee. The other district attorneys are elected officials. If everybody had to resign to run for office, we'd only have rich people like Mr. McPhillips running for office, instead of having people who are working people that had to work all their lives. Governor Wallace would have to resign to run for the Senate. Jerry Beasley would have to resign. Bill Baxley would have to resign. We wouldn't have any public officials who could run for office.
A college campus somehow seems the appropriate place for Vivian Malone Jones to deliver her message. It's probably because 15 years ago her entire lifestyle changed when Governor George Wallace stood in the door of Foster Auditorium to deny her admission to the University of Alabama. Since graduating from Alabama with honors, Ms. Jones has worked with the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division, the President's Council on Youth Opportunity, and other government programs involving human rights and urban affairs. She is currently Executive Director of the Voter Education Project in Atlanta, where she lives with her husband and 2 children. Ms. Jones talks about life after Alabama.
Well, obviously there's been some publicity associated with both my entrance as well as my attendance and graduation from the University of Alabama. I think as a result of that, in a way it's been, I think it was a profitable experience for me. I've had the advantage of meeting people perhaps that I might not have been able to meet had I not gone through that particular situation. So I guess all in all it was definitely a worthwhile experience in my life.
What is your message to college graduates?
My message to college graduates is that they have a responsibility that now that they are at a point in their lives when they have achieved a certain amount of education, that they not only have a responsibility to themselves but to the black people in general.
What is your feelings of the quote, New South?
Well, I've spoken to that on several occasions in terms of a New South. Yes, there is a New South. We have seen progress. But I think on the other hand, we're seeing the re-emergence of the clans. We're seeing things like the Bakke decision. We know that's going to affect what happens in terms of affirmative action. So even though there has been progress, we have to be mindful of the fact that there still is a long way to go.
Janet May, WSFA TV News.
How much it cost? $2,000. Where'd you get it? 60.
Down.
But now start playing. Oh yes, oh yes. That's a good pitch, Bum.
Take your eyes off it now. Yes. Keep on going.
George, as you know, we're in a political campaign, and I'm leading all the polls, and that's obvious to the folks that are attacking me. If I was running 56, there wouldn't be an attack made. I practice law in Russellville, Alabama. I've always conducted myself in an ethical manner. I've always complied with all the laws of the state, including the ethics law. I've not violated any laws. I'm not going to be running a smear campaign. This is all this is a smear campaign, mudslinging. I'm going to run a positive campaign based on my reputation that I have in the Senate, my reputation as an attorney, and my reputation as an administrator.
What about the publication of checks made out to you, some $5,000, some $2,500 for retainer fees?
George, if you're going to do anything wrong, I don't think you do them by check. I pay my car payments by check, house payments by check. I receive fees by check. And if I was going to do anything illegal, anything wrong, I'm not going to be accepting any payments by check. I think that I have sense enough to know that. I have done nothing wrong, and the people that know this know that I have not done anything wrong. It's a mere smear and a mudslinging by desperate people that are trying to get into the race.
Slow pitch softball has come a long way in the past few years. It's one of the fastest growing participation sports in the country. The sport has become so popular, it even has its own national publication now. More than 4,000 Montgomeryans competed in 26 slow pitch softball leagues this summer. A fall league is a possibility this year. The slow pitch boom has reached just about everyone. The Montgomery area alone has leagues for men, women, and girls of just about any age. About the only group not affected by the softball boom are young boys from about high school age on down. Baseball is still the dominant sport with them. But everyone else seems to be switching to slow pitch. And since more people are playing more slow pitch softball, more people are buying more softball equipment. One local sporting goods dealer says on a percentage basis, his sales of softball equipment have increased more in the last 3 years than have any other type of sporting goods equipment. And the softball equipment has become more sophisticated.
Gloves have gotten much larger, been specially made for softball use. The aluminum bat was a great innovation and now comes in many varied weights, sizes, lengths, which in the past softball bats were mostly all one size. I think basically the uniforms have become modernized, the double knits and the pretty designs and the colors have really made a difference in uniforms. I think basically that's been the biggest changes.
But why the big move to slow pitch to begin with? Well, probably because it offers so many things to so many people.
Well, I think it's mainly because it's a game for everybody. I mean, we have out here at Lagoon Park, for instance, ranging in age from 12 to probably 55 or 60 years old playing the game of slow pitch softball. And it's just a game that no matter how young or how old you are, there is a place for you to play if you want to play.
Why is slow pitch a game for everybody as opposed to any other sport?
Well, let's say as opposed to fast pitch softball, it's a game that you know, it has a lot of defense, a lot of offense. Everybody that plays the game gets to handle the ball. Everybody that plays the game gets to hit the ball. Everybody that plays the game, you know, gets to run, gets to, you know, just do all the things that go into making up a softball game. And I think that interests people more than say fast pitch softball that could come down to a battle between a pitcher and 9 batters. I mean, it's just a game that everybody can play.
And the great thing about slow pitch, regardless of a player's ability, whether he is, you know, just beginning or whatever, there is a level. There's a league level for any player, you know, in his flight of competition, and that's what makes it so great.
Lagoon Park has meant a great deal to softball in the Montgomery area. The $1 million 5-diamond complex makes it easier for tournament and league officials to control their games, and it's a lot more fun for the players. Lagoon Park has seen nearly 1,500 softball games this summer, counting league and tournament play, and the great majority of those games were slow pitch. Of course, everyone associated with the construction and management of the Lagoon Park softball complex firmly believe it's the finest of its kind in the country, and they get few arguments from the players.
As far as the complex itself, it's unsurpassed by any I've seen. It's the finest, no question about it. I've talked with all the players from Howard and Nelson's. They feel the same way. The playing field, you know, I would say I've played on a couple of playing fields itself, maybe as good, none any better.
For one thing, it's made Montgomery the most desirable softball city in the world. I mean, this complex is something that's unique in the country and unique in the world, and it's brought teams here that would never have come here, and it's probably in the future will send teams from Montgomery to places they would have never gone from Montgomery.
And then there's the ultimate in slow pitch softball, the National Slow Pitch Conference. Now, slow pitch is a hitter's game on any level, but nothing demonstrates that any better than the National Conference, a group of super teams. Hitting, especially home run hitting, is the name of this game. It's not unusual for any one of these teams to hit 20 or more home runs in a single game. And they don't get together just by chance. These clubs recruit the top players. In fact, although Alabama has never produced a national championship team, most of the teams in the National Slow Pitch Conference have recruited Alabamians. For instance, defending national champion Nelson Painting of Oklahoma City has 4 players from the Dothan area on its roster. And James Boyette of North Carolina's Howard and Carroll is from Phoenix City. Boyette is one of the many players in the league who can hit a home run just about any time he steps to the plate. He leads the nation with more than 240 home runs already this season. But even though the game itself is a lot different from hardball or fast-pitch softball, Boyette says the mechanics of hitting aren't very different at all.
Your wrist, your hips, you know, the technicalities of it are basically the same. Your timing has to be real good at slow pitch because the ball comes in so slow, there's a larger margin there there for, you know, chance to, you know, overstride or wait too late on the ball and stuff of that nature. And but as far as the mechanics of it, it's basically the same. A lot of timing, takes a lot of practice.
But some fans of slow pitch don't like the style of play used by the super teams. They believe the home run game could ruin slow pitch softball, but men like Boyette have a different opinion.
Well, the home runs made slow pitch, you know, without question. People like to see the action, and sometimes it gets a little out of hand. I really don't think softball is meant to be 38-30, but then I don't think it's meant to be 11-10 either. I think in 24-20, 22-19, but people like to see the ball move. There's a lot of action in fast pitch. Everybody hits the ball every time, which means it has to be a defensive play on every hitter. I tell a lot of people it's kind of like pro basketball. It doesn't look like people play defense, but usually the teams that play the best usually win.
Perhaps the most overlooked member of that defense is the pitcher. It may look as if the pitcher does nothing more than offer up the ball like a sacrificial lamb, but there's a lot more to it than that.
I've been pitching slow pitch ever since about 1960, and it's an art, It's just like hitting. Hitting, there's a science to hitting other than just having brute strength. Your timing, you got great wrist hitters, and you combat all this with an art to pitching. And the way you do that is move the ball up and down, change speeds on the ball, and you got to have perfect control in slow pitch. You got to be able to drop the ball within a 2 to 4 inch radius behind the plate and hit the corners, and you got to know your hitters. You got to never forget what a hitter does the time before, Just getting out there throwing the ball it's not going to get you there against these good teams. There's an art to it.
It is an art, but for David Carroll, softball, even at the top level, means more than just winning ball games.
It's a great game. It's a great way to enjoy the weekend. You can be with your families, and if you get beat, you've at least spent the weekend with your families and so forth. And a lot of people get to see parts of the country that they never get to see.
So there you have it. The game means a lot of different things to a lot of people, and everyone has a slightly different idea on how slow pitch should be played. But it continues to grow and shows no signs of letting up. I'm Dan O'Brien reporting for Composite.
The state of the Treasurer's office was revealed at a news conference in the Senate chamber. In this somewhat unusual manner, State Treasurer Annie Laurie Gunter said she was pleased with the condition of her office. She said almost 90% of the total state deposits are in interest-bearing accounts. The remainder, she said, are in demand accounts where the money is immediately available for use by the state.
Now, I think this gives a very excellent report of the condition of the State Treasurer's office, and I want to assure the people of this state that their money is in good hands and it is being invested wisely and in the best interest of all the people. It's being invested, I think, so that the greatest amount of interest possible can be accrued to the general fund. 89% of our total deposits as of this date in interest-bearing accounts is about as close as you could possibly get. You've got to leave enough money in the demand accounts. And one way to understand it, and one way that's made it easy for me to understand, you think of it as your own personal money. A part of your money is in a savings account, part of your money is in a checking account. And you've got to leave enough money in your checking account to take care of the checks that you write every day. And this is the time account is the savings account, and the demand account is the checking account. And we must keep enough money in those accounts to, but there has been a great deal of money invested in the interest-bearing accounts, and I think that at the end of this fiscal year, we will certainly have earned more interest for the State General Fund than has ever been earned before.
The state treasurer said demand and time accounts are maintained in more than 300 banks in the state, money that's available for a variety of loans.
We do feel that the smaller banks out in the rural areas do need to have money in order, particularly this time of the year, the farmers are wanting loans and that kind of thing. And we feel that the money that's lent out by these smaller banks into the community to small businessmen or farmers, that it is more than returned in tax revenue that it generates, even probably more than the interest it would bring in if we had it in time accounts.
Mrs. Gunter, who was appointed state treasurer in June upon removal of Melba Till Allen on a conviction of the state ethics law, said changes in the office would come on a gradual basis. George Mitchell, WSFA TV News.
Reappraisals were completed last December on the 86,000 parcels of land in Montgomery County. Since then, the County Tax Assessor's Office has been checking the results with current assessment information on file in the Tax Assessor's Office.
We are going through each assessment and checking legal description, and if there's any legal description doesn't correspond with the reappraisal, then the company has to come back and recheck. And we hope to have this done sometime by late November, and we will mail out the notices to each homeowner of their assessed value. And at this time, they'll have 15 days to make an appointment with Board of Equalization for if they don't like the value that was placed on the property, and this is time to appeal it.
Unless the special session of the legislature produces a new percentage rate, beginning October 1st, all farms and homes will be assessed at 15% of their fair market value, commercial property at 25%. And Driver adds that with current assessments for homes based on an average of 20%, it's possible with the new 15% rate for property taxes on relatively new homes to decrease. This is Glenda Webb, WSFA TV News.
For Vicki Coker, it was just a matter of holding on to a 5-stroke lead. That's where she started the second round, and that's where she finished, 5 strokes in front of her nearest rival. But it wasn't an impressive round, and 8 over par 80 was the best Coker could do. She finished with a 36-hole total of 154, 10 over par. Patsy Crew held on to second place, 15 over for 2 days. Rain held up the final round for 2 hours this morning, and the course was still damp when the women resumed play, but Coker refused to use the weather as an excuse for the high scores.
Was the course tough out there?
No. I made it tough the way I was playing, but it wasn't an exceptionally hard course. This is my home course, so I expected to do better.
Did the rain bother you at all?
No, sir. I played better in the rain than I did when the sun came out, so I can't say the rain affected me too much.
What did you learn in Indianapolis at the Open?
I basically just watched the girls and tried to see what they did different from me, and I saw a lot of good golf. I saw Sally Little shoot her 65, and you know, you're bound to learn from something like that.
Was there a lot of pressure on you up there?
No, I didn't feel any pressure. I felt more pressure qualifying for the Open than I did playing in the Open. So I had nothing to lose.
And there are many people who say, well, you've given us too much. I haven't given you too much. If you had met in many occasions in the Senate especially for a whole day instead of meeting 30 minutes and then adjourning and having that 5 o'clock rule that I can't work after 5 o'clock, I got to go someplace else. Well, there are many people in Alabama who work daylight till dawn. They work 2 shifts, 3 shifts to make ends meet. And I don't see why the Senate of Alabama couldn't have abolished the 5 o'clock rule a long time ago instead of waiting up just until the election is coming around here before September. Court of Appeals in New Orleans, the 5th Circuit Court of Federal Appeals says that Governor Wallace has nothing to do with the prison system in Alabama. It's all in the hands of a board that I asked you to abolish and give to me, but you didn't see fit to give to the governor. But I'm appealing you today for this reason. The next order that's going to come from the governor, from the judge, a federal judge, and I still don't agree with the matter of federal judge taking over and running the affairs of the various and sundry states. But I want to tell you that the next order, in my judgment, is going to be an order in which you're going to see thousands and hundreds and thousands of convicted felons turned loose upon the people of Alabama because you did not provide as you should have provided and you must have provided and you had the money to have provided had, of course, some of the special interest group not have interfered in your efforts to so divide. Now, the most important matter, one of the most important matters that you will, of course, be called upon to consider in this session is one that you should have already considered in the first place, because for 3 years, 2 or 3 years, the House of Representatives has passed a bill giving property relief for the people of Alabama and sent it to the Senate. But the Senate did not pass anything. They should have gotten together with you and worked out a compromise. Then we wouldn't have to be here on the eve of these high taxes going into effect, being placed upon the people of Alabama. But you saw fit to spend millions of dollars filibustering and debating mainly in the Senate, and as a consequence, you're back here tonight. You better not fail this time. You better pass one by a Saturday night of the 6th. Some of you are going to have a lot of political funerals to attend on September 5th throughout this state, and I can't go to all of them. I want you to know that. You have a chance tonight to do something about it in the matter of the property taxes, and I asked you to do it for the people of Alabama, because I have done the best I could to put the hay down where the goats should get it tonight. I think it's very understandable. And you don't filibuster on these bills. You vote them up or you vote them down. If you don't like them, you vote against them. If you like them, you vote for them, and then get away from here on August 6th and save the people of Alabama some money that ought to have been saved a long time ago. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
You know, the Senate adopted a special order calendar this afternoon that will help in that the budget will be the first order of business, followed by the tax bills. This is going to help considerably. We also did away with the 5 o'clock rule. We have set a limit of debate for 3 hours on these bills. So I cannot see that anybody can really hold us up in a filibuster. So I am very hopeful that we'll get out by the 6th.
George, I'm going to be disappointed if we don't accomplish and pass all the bills that was in the call, just the bills in the call. Yes, I think we can do it. I think the governor brought home the point that many of us have known, and I'm encouraged by the fact that the senators I've talked to just since the governor spoke, that we've got to pass those bills.
I think everybody pretty well expected the type speech and the content of the speech, and I think now everybody wants to get on down to work and work out whatever problems exist with the legislation that's in.
I think under the circumstances, we're going to pass a TVA bill, we're going to pass a lid bill, or whatever it is it's called now. We're going to pass that, a combination of 5 or 6 bills there. We'll pass the education budget. Out of the others, I'm not sure what will pass, George, but I think there'll be some of the others. Some money will be forthcoming, I think, for prisons. And needs to be. I'm not sure that this is the answer, but certainly we need to do something about it. I'm not at all certain that pensions and securities isn't getting so big every day that it's going to swallow up the rest of the state one of these days. I'm not at all certain that they need the money. Perhaps they do.
Can all of this be done by Saturday midnight?
Well, I imagine the way things have been handled so far this afternoon here, we could get away Friday, George.
Well, I think that every legislator here perhaps didn't want to come. You know, the educational budget hasn't been passed, and every legislator realizes that the education trust fund budget must be passed, and so for that reason, nobody, you know, wants to not be here for that reason. Everybody wants to pass the education trust fund budget. I guess that's the only thing that really isn't controversial at this time would be the budget.
Do you think that all the items in the governor's call will make it through this session?
I had to be very, very optimistic to think that everything would make it through, and I even would imagine that the governor would think he's being very optimistic if he thought everything would make it through. It would be good if everything could make it through, but legislative matters being what they are, there are some questions still.
What he proposed?
Certainly do. He pointed out that the alternatives to a failure to construct new facilities are completely unacceptable both to the governor's office, to the legislature, and the people of the state. He repeated what has already been well publicized, that we face the release of prisoners. And the $15 million bond issue that he proposed to the legislature will take care of the current backlog of prisoners in county jails, and we're highly supportive of that.
From your standpoint, do you believe that that can be accomplished in this 4 or 5, whatever many days it takes session?
We have reason to believe. We've talked to virtually as many of the members of the House and Senate as we can. Mr. Beasley and Mr. McCorkadale have promised their personal support as well as their positions of leaders of the two houses. We've talked to virtually every member that we possibly can, myself or my staff, to various members, and the support seems pretty solid at this point.
The Attorney General's office charges that Woodland Hills Cemetery is a public nuisance because it damages all persons who come in contact with the organization to some degree. Persons who bought plots at the cemetery signed a contract that stated the company agrees to deposit into the Irrevocable Perpetual Care and Maintenance Trust Fund 10% of the purchase price for maintenance. However, sworn affidavits charge that persons were buried for approximately 1 month before the grave was covered, or charged the company sold plots that were deeded to other persons. A statement of facts included in the suit states, it is the owner of Woodland Hills, Charles M. Smith III's, duty to perform those functions contracted for in the purchase of the burial place. Perpetual maintenance is not performed as contracted and the property is in seriously deteriorating condition, and the owner has conducted business in an improper manner. Ellis Hannon of the Attorney General's office said today, since they began investigating the case, their office has received over 500 responses dealing with property neglect.
From persons who have complained about improper funeral arrangements, persons who have buried relatives and discovered days later that graves were not covered. In certain cases, it's rained and has filled up the graves or the vaults, and certain caskets have been seen floating in water.
Do you know any of these complaints to be fact?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we are filing today a motion for summary judgment with supporting affidavits establishing the truth of every allegation that we have given in our original petition.
Robert Pritchard, the manager of Woodland Hills, told Channel 12 today that the cemetery was without a caretaker until 4 weeks ago, and since that time they've been working to get the property in order. Pritchard said he was speaking for the management. In addition to legal action taken by the Attorney General's office, a bill will be introduced during this special legislative session that provides for supervision and control of perpetual care trust funds and also establishes penalties for cemetery owners who violate